All right, everybody. Today we have Greg Noll and Ed Hattemer from PMAK. They're going to talk about all things propane today. Just give you some background information. Greg is from Kansas, began his propane career in 1976 with Ferrellgas as a route salesman and bobtail driver. After 8 years, Greg became the branch manager in Perry, Kansas. Over the next 15 years, Greg continued to work as a branch manager and had retail locations in several Northeast Kansas and Northwest Missouri locations. Greg left Ferrellgas in 2004 to become Director of Education and Safety for PMAK. 2008, Greg became Executive Vice President of PMAK and is still involved with safety and education for all propane marketers and propane users. Ed, born and raised also in Kansas from Okaloosa, spent 23 years in the propane retail business starting in 1993. At that time, he was involved with bulk and cylinder delivery, an installation technician, an operation supervisor, and bulk plant vehicle inspection. Over the last 6 years, he has served as Director of Education for Kansas Propane and Education and Research Council. His primary duties there is the Certified Employee Training Program instructor for all the propane companies across the state.
I'm going to try to get my PowerPoint up on the screen, but it takes to tell me my host is disabled.
Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, try it now.
I think we're getting there.
All right, great.
What do you see on your screen?
You still.
Well, that's not what we want.
Right.
It's not it. There it is right there. Yeah.
I believe there we go.
There we go.
If you want to put that in presentation mode, that would work.
Okay, I think we're ready to start if you're ready to start.
Yes, go ahead.
I know that I'm using Greg's computer, so it tells you everybody that I'm Greg Noll, but I am actually Ed Hattemer using his computer. So what I've done is I've taken your checklist and kind of put a slide with most all of those kind of explaining the way we look at it, hopefully the way you look at it as well. The first slide, it's pretty self-explanatory. You got to have your facility sign. It needs to be weatherproofed. Needs to have the owner's name, facility address, emergency phone number 24/7, and class 1 dealer's license number. Those have to be in 3-inch letters. Pretty well explains itself. Yes.
Ed, if I could just stop you there. If you look down in the bottom of your PowerPoint, there'll be, it looks kind of like a fountain. That'll put you in presentation mode. I think people can see the slides better that way.
All right. Looks like a fountain.
Looks like
So let me know if this works better.
okay, well, you can go that way too. Yes, that'll do it.
That look better?
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep, not a problem. I guess if you guys have questions as I'm going through, stop me. If not, I'll just keep rolling. The second one is your AO2 is the security. You've got to have one of two things at each plant. You either have to have a fence around the area, and it has to be 6 foot high to keep the valves from being tampered with, and you need 2 means of egress. Unless it's smaller than 100 feet, then all you need is 1. Or you need an approved locking device that prevents people from opening the valves on their own. Went back one too far. I'll get this here in a second. This is an example of a purchased tampering device that you can buy to keep someone from opening valves on a storage tank. That's, of course, permissible, but the way I've always looked at it, if you can do something to prohibit the use of that valve without compromising any safety, to me, that's an approved locking device. I've seen a lot of people put a chain through the valve on the top and attach it to something solid and padlock it to where that valve won't turn. So the key idea here is to make sure you lock it off without hurting the safety of the valve. Lighting, if you have people that are going to be working at night at this plant, whether they're filling bobtails or receiving loads from transport, they need to have adequate lighting. Lots of times you may get an answer from somebody, well, we don't work at night. Well, that doesn't control who brings propane to your plant, which can come any time of the day or night. Container markings, they shall be marked flammable in at least 6-inch letters. They need to be marked LP gas, LPG, propane, or butane in 6-inch letters. Each tank must have a data plate attached and it must be readable. And no smokings must be posted near the container area. This is an example of a data plate. This is actually off a 500-gallon tank, but it would have the same information if you were looking at a storage. That's what you need to be looking for a data plate, get this information. This, I could not find a good picture of a properly decaled plant. I've got one here that has partially right. It's got the propane on it. It's got this no smoking, but it does not have the flammable. And if you also notice towards the middle, there's a 1075 placard on this tank. That does not need to be there. Placards are for when you are actually transporting the tank on highways or byways or by ship or rail. It does not have to be there. It's also got a NFPA 704 decal. If you look real close, it says 140. That is an old signage that is not used anymore. It actually should say 240. And those should be on plants as well. Questions to this point? Anybody? All right, I'll keep moving.
How's that there, Ed? You can also put, if you do have a question, you can put it in the chat box. I'm monitoring that as well.
Okay, all right. This tells what a 704, NFPA 704 decal is, who requires it, and who enforces this requirement. According to NFPA fire code, anything that is NFPA 30 should have one. It should be for flammable and combustible liquids code. I do not believe, it's not on your form to check, but when people call and ask us, they tell us they need decals for a storage tank. We always include this and tell them to put this in as well. So I don't know how you guys want to work that as far as what you require, since it's not on your requirements for their inspection. But those should be on there.
Ed, we did get a question. It's maybe a good time for, because you're just talking about locking devices.
Yes.
We got, when are locking devices required for valves? Just when the facility is closed or not monitored?
If they are inside a fence, the locking devices do not have to be on the valves. If they have a location with no fence, then they are required to be on the valves. and no one there. So either have to have a locked gate with no one in attendance, or you have to have a locked valve with no one in attendance. That answer that question?
I'm trying to see. Or if you just want to speak out, that's fine too.
If you haven't noticed, this is the first time I've done a Zoom call like this, so I might be a little choppy.
Perfectly fine. I think you continue on. We could ask later if we need to.
Container foundation must be designed for permanent installation and stationary service above ground, placed on masonry or other non-combustible structures. Supports must be located on concrete or masonry foundation. I have a couple of examples of that. This first picture is one of them you actually sent to me. It's got a storage tank on concrete piers. It's hard to see, but off to the left, when I went by it, off to the left, it has pads. Like on this picture, this one is concrete. It has steel saddle on top of the concrete pad, and then it has a pad in between the steel and the tank to keep the corrosion down and keep it on a level surface. You also have to have corrosion protection for these saddles and foundations. A good example is this picture right here. It's got the concrete pad on underneath the steel saddle, and you can see that there has been a pad added between the steel and the tank to cushion it, and then they have properly weatherproofed it from there. I don't have any pictures for this, but it's pretty self-explanatory. If you've got diesel or gasoline at the same location and it's got a dike around it to keep spills from spreading, you have to have 10 feet from the center of that dike to any container. The container itself on A08 must be at least 20 feet from any flammable or combustible liquid above ground storage tank. We got a picture here of a cylinder rack that does not meet that 20 feet. That would be the same thing for a bulk plant, 20 feet for either one. This is not a desirable situation we have there. LP gas containers must be protected from damage from vehicles. If you look there on 08 of 586612, it's very vague of what needs to be done. The only statement it says is what's written on your checklist. It has to be protected from damage from vehicle. It's very vague. I probably want to talk to people about this on a more one-on-one basis to decide what needs to be done. I don't have a good answer. That takes care of that for now. Tanks need to be painted, need to be in good condition. This is an example of a tank that definitely is not in good condition and needs to have some lots of scraping, maybe some power washing and cleaned up, be repainted. Tank here we have is in good condition, freshly painted. They need to be white or a light reflective color. Aluminum is what is good as well. Need combustible storage kept away, weeds, grass, trash, they all have to be at least 10 feet from the tank. I have a good example of here of somebody that probably needs to do some work. Not only the tank needs painted, but they've got skids and a wooden ladder stacked right up against the storage, That all needs to be removed. Bulk facility inspections, the pipe requirements needs to be metallic pipe and tubing. Fittings must be steel, brass, copper, malleable iron, ductile iron. Shows that type of iron in this location here. All the correct piping. Pretty much self-explanatory there. Containers, outlets, and inlets need to be marked as well. They should be labeled or color-coded, liquid or vapor. The first picture we have here, we've got two valves, two systems. The liquid valves are color-coded red, and the vapor valves are color-coded yellow. The picture on the next page, it's kind of hard to read, but look up there towards the right. You can make out where it says liquid, and on the other it says vapor. This is an example where they were both color-coded and labeled liquid and vapor. These pipes that you run from the storage tanks to where you fill, they need to be protected. They need to be permanently installed to compensate for expansion, contraction, jarring, vibration, and settling. Piping should be supported and protected against physical damage. Portion of the pipe in contact with support, corrosion causing substance shall be protected. We've got here, if you look on the left, underneath the tank, you can see that they have put 90-degree angle bars in to support the above pipe. And then they have used clamps to use on the smaller pipes to hold them in place to keep them from drooping and causing pressure, downward pressure on the piping. Here's another example of supports. They've taken piping and put a U-shaped fastener underneath the piping to hold it in place and support it. Leaks. They need to be checked for leaks on a regular basis. And it says here at the normal operating pressure. Well, the normal operating pressure in the summertime could be as high as 170, 180 pounds pressure. The wintertime, same system, everything's the same except for the temperature. You may have 20 or 30 pounds pressure to check those lines with. It's the normal operating pressure at the time that you're doing the test. They all have to have an emergency shutoff. Do something here if it works. All liquid transfer lines, 1.5 inches or larger, and vapor that are 1.25 inches must be equipped with an emergency shutoff valves. Shutoff valves must be incorporated a manual shutoff remote location. It can't be less than 25 feet or more than 100 feet from the path of egress from the properly marked. Their owner shall demonstrate proper operation of the ESV. They need to show you that that works. Here's an example of a remote shutoff. Might see a sign like that. More often, you may see a sign like this. Either one's fine. It's marking where the emergency shutoff valve is, at least 25 feet away, no more than 100. Automatic shutdown on internal valves and liquid service shall be provided using a fire actuator. The thermal sensing element of the internal valve shall be within 5 feet of the internal valve. Here's an example of what we call a Snappy Joe. The one on the left is in the open position. The one on the right is in closed position. This picture shows where there are the internal workings of these valves. And in each one of those, whether it's a cable type or a pneumatic type, has a fusible element built into them, where if it gets too hot, it's a fire, they will melt. This is one with a cable. You can see the cable's got the spring pulled out with the fusible link, and the bottom picture shows one that has melted and has automatically closed the system down. Same thing, same theory for a pneumatic line. The pneumatic line up above is right above where the piping is. You can see the gas going through. Once that pneumatic line melts, the air is lost and it will shut the pneumatic valve down. Internal valve remote shut off. Internal valves installed in containers of 4,000 gallons or greater shall be equipped with remote closure and automatic shut off using thermal fire actuated by either an installed but not equipped with a remote closure, and that needs to have been done by 2003, and all tanks by July 1st of 2011. This is an ESV, a picture of one with pneumatic operator. And this is an internal valve with a pneumatic operator. They will close, they are the emergency close down, close off. Need to have hydrostatic relief valves. These valves go between two positive shutoffs. You can see that there is a shutoff hooked up to the back of the truck with a shutoff valve, and then the Snappy Joe in the front of the picture. When those are shut off, you look at the top of the upright pipe, and there is a hydrostatic relief valve there. That's for expansion. When that gas gets warm, especially in that black hose, it will build up too much pressure. That hydrostatic relief valve will relieve that pressure. Need to look for those between every positive shutoffs. Relief valves. Every propane tank, whether it's a 20-pound cylinder or 120,000 gallon bulk plant, it needs to have at least one pressure relief valve. This is a picture. The relief valves is at the bottom of the picture with stacks going up to the top with a relief valve cover at the top of them. I'll talk more about this in a little bit. This is a relief valve without stacks. It has a cover on it. Always has to have a cover. Talk about the liquid level gauges. If you're filling dramatically, it needs to be equipped with a fixed maximum liquid level gauge to indicate the maximum filling levels for the services in which the container is to be used. There is an exception. Tanks built prior to December 31st of 65 do not require these. This is an example of a fixed maximum liquid level gauge. There's a little nut there at the top. You open it up, it will spit out vapor. And when the tank reaches its 80% fill mark, or 85, depends on the application, it will start putting liquid out, lets you know that it is full. This is another example of an 80% bleeder on the back of a bobtail. Most bobtails, storage tanks can be filled to 85%. Also on 4,000 gallons or larger, you got to have a pressure relief valve, fixed maximum level, some type of float, rotary gauge, slip tube gauge, a pressure gauge, and a temperature gauge. These all need to be on a storage tank. There's an example on top of the tank, relief valves with stacks, an 80% bleeder or fixed maximum level gauge. This is the float gauge, just like it sounds, it'll float in the back. As it rises, the percentage will rise with it. This is a rotary gauge. It does the same thing as the float gauge, but it's done manually. There's an 80% bleeder right there in the middle. You move the bar from 100 at the top down to where liquid comes out. And where liquid comes out, that tells you how many percent is in that tank. Your picture here has all the valves together. Pressure gauge is usually going to be at the top, float gauge in the middle, temperature gauge usually down around the bottom. Also shows a relief valve stacks on the top of the tank in the vapor space. Talk about rain caps. All the relief valves that you have need to have some type of a rain cap on them. The caps are always closed unless there is pressure being relieved, and they need to be set up to where they close back on their own. Also says at the bottom, the pressure relief valve discharge on each above ground container of more than 2,000 gallons shall be piped upward to a point of at least 7 feet with an opening unobstructed by air. This is a relief valve again with no stack. This is relief valves with a stack. And at this time, I want to let you know, you guys work on the NFPA 2008 gas code. And according to your checklist, you're supposed to check to make sure all these tanks have their relief stacks on them. However, in 2014 and up through 2020, the fact that relief stacks have to be on tank is no longer a requirement. And what happens normally is you guys will go through your list, you'll notice it, you'll give a deficiency for that. And usually the marketer will get ahead of us that, hey, we got written up for a relief stack not being on the tank. And we get with the higher ups at the fire marshal and say, this is no longer a requirement in newer versions of the gas code. And usually that violation is taken off at that time. You have to have flex connectors between the pumps and the containers, and between container and to compensate for expansion, contraction, jarring, vibration. If it's wire braid, it's used for reinforcement, it shall be corrosion resistant. Flex connectors shall never be over 60 inches long and shall be installed in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. Here's an example, a good example of a flex connector on a storage tank. And we've got another picture of one, same deal. It's a flex connector to let the vibrations of the tank not affect the piping. Port of transfer, this one's another tough one to try to explain. If the point of transfer is not located at the container, or the container is not a stationary position, the distance shall point to the transfer and the exposures shall be in accordance with 653. Well, there is a table in the book under 653 that lists several different distances that you got to check on. So you have to look at that chart and do it on a case-by-case process. I'm going to hit just a few on cylinder locations. All outside cabinets containing cylinders awaiting use for resale or part of a cylinder exchange shall be located in accordance with the following. If you've got 5 feet from a doorway or an opening where the building has at least 2 means of egress, you're good. If you have 10 feet and you have to have 1 door, you have 10 feet from a doorway, at least 20 feet away from an automotive service station fuel dispenser. We got a picture here. I've got several racks. If you've got 10 feet if you got one door, you have to have 10 feet. If you have two doors, you have to have at least 5 feet. Once again, you have to have 20 feet from a fuel dispenser. You have to have some way of securing it. Cabinet location open to public shall be protected by a lockable, ventilated metal enclosure that prevents tampering with the valves. Pretty simple. If you're going to have cylinders out, you're going to have a cage to put them in. Stop tampering and people from stealing them. Cabinet protection, and we're going to have another discrepancy here. Protection against vehicle impact shall be provided in accordance with good engineering practices where vehicle traffic is expected at the location. This protection of each cabinet shall consist of a guard post, either tire bumpers or curbs made of concrete. Tire bumpers or curbs shall be at least 4 feet long and at least 5 inches in height and shall be permanently affixed. This falls into the same thing that we talked about on the risers for stacks for relief valves. In 2014, it was determined through extensive testing that the cages themselves was adequate protection for the cylinders and the cylinder valves. So same thing, you guys on your inspection sheet are going to probably ding somebody because they don't have protection. The marketer will get a hold of us. We'll talk to the fire marshal and say, hey, they follow 2014 and newer 58s, and that violation is usually removed. All cabinets must be marked with propane, no smoking, owner information, NFPA 704 markings, and product information. And there is a rack where I think everything that was required on that previous page is on there in some location. Signage, warnings labels shall be applied to all cylinders of 100 pounds or less. Warning labels shall include information on the potential hazards of LP gas. Although this picture here is a little bit blurry, this would be an example of what you might see on a cylinder that's required that's under 100 pounds or less. Cylinder condition, cylinders show no excess of denting, and on your chart, on your inspection sheet, it says building. I, however, think that probably was meant to say bulging, gouging, corrosion, or any remove shall be removed from service. All cylinders 4 to 40 pounds shall be equipped with an overfill protection device. Example of a bulging tank. Look to the left at the top of that tank. There's pretty good sized dent. Got a pretty good sized gouge in this one. And a pretty rusty cylinder here. One of the things that it didn't tell you to check for, but probably should, is the tank that might look something like this. These have been exposed to fire. They may be reusable, but these tanks would have to be sent off and re-inspected by a manufacturer to be put back into service. Anytime it's an aluminum cylinder that has shown evidence of fire, it is automatically rejected and can never be reused. And here's an example of an OPD valve top. They usually have a triangle handle on them like this. And lastly, cylinder fire extinguishers, where their aggregate quantity of propane stored greater than 720 pounds, an 18 BC portable fire extinguisher is located in no more than 50 feet from the storage location. In the 2020 58, And I think starting in 17, they started requiring that they be an ABC portable cylinder extinguisher instead of a BC. I guess I'm ready for questions.
All right, you can unmute and ask any question you have, or you can put them in chat. As again, I'm monitoring that. So, are there any questions?
There is 3 in chat, I guess, here. I can figure out how to open
No, I
them up.
believe that's, I had put the slides in, a copy of the PDF of the slides from today.
Okay.
Let everybody know that, could have followed along. Also, there's a question before about the locking devices. I don't see anything in chat. I'm not sure if anybody has any questions.
Okay.
Well, I can just say thank you, Ed. Thank you, Greg, for letting Ed use your computer. That worked out really well.
No problem.
And this recording will be on our website. Okay, hold on. We do have a question.
Okay.
Any bonding grounding requirements?
Nothing for the propane itself, no. Only bonding that I ever run across when we're talking about is when people are using methanol to put into tanks for moisture, and that would have nothing to do with what you guys would be checking for.
Okay, and we got another question. Can you have a 40-pound tank close to a gas can, or does it need to be 20 feet away?
It should not be stored in the same area. It should be the 20 feet away. Any others?
Again, I'll have this video up on our website. You can view it there. If you want to refer back to it, the slides are in chat. You should be able to download those. Again, I'll put my email address in if you have any questions, or you can reach out to me. And if anybody would like to get notices of these videos that we're doing, but you're not getting it, you can put your email address in chat and I will send them out to you. Well,
Sounds quiet.
I believe, yeah, it does sound quiet. So we'll follow up. If there's any questions, again, I just want to thank you both.
If somebody comes up with something they want to ask, you got my email, just shoot it to me and I'll get you an answer.
Sounds great. Yes, I can do that.